let's get started on our third session. Let's see, who are we missing? We're missing the Musselmans. Only they aren't Musselmans anymore. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and start and they'll come in, I'm sure. Education falls into three basic categories: public, private, and homeschooling. How many of you have heard of the Leeper decision? Texas. It's a Supreme Court decision. State of Texas, of course, the state of Texas has its own legislature and governor and Supreme Court. And they have decided certain things that are appropriate for Texas. Education is under the authority of the state, not the federal government, or should be anyway. Okay, y'all know that. So the Texas Supreme Court decided that homeschoolers were actually private schools. This was huge because back in the day it was like illegal and you were persecuted for trying to homeschool. So now it is legal. But what this means is it puts you under the law as applies to private schools. And there is a law, a statute regarding private schools in Texas that they must have certain curricula, and some of you have already read this stuff, but I put it all down here. Homeschoolers must abide by the following: a child pursuing a bona fide course of study at home designed to meet the basic education goals of reading, spelling, grammar, mathematics, and good citizenship is considered to be attending a private school. Now, when I give you those reading, spelling, grammar, math, and citizenship, those are in the statute that was passed like in 1901 or, back in the day when science was not a big thing, okay? So this is the statute that we are under. Bona fide means genuine. I think the Latin means in good faith. Okay, and so if you learn Latin with your kids, you'll be able to translate all this stuff. And it is recommended that parents choose written curricula. And so basically what that means is, we're not putting our kids in front of the TV and watching the History Channel for our history lesson, So now good citizenship is sometimes equated with a study of government. Like, like 9th grade civics or 12th grade government, Constitution, stuff like that. Now, I agree with that, but after reading that quote by George Washington, wouldn't you think that good citizenship is a little bit broader than just learning the three branches of government? Yeah, being a good citizen is being that responsible person, that responsible part of your community and your family. Okay, some myths, and this is important. Parents do not have to register with the state or local school district. The only time that you have to interact at all with a school is if you are withdrawing the student from a public school, and then you have to just give a letter of notice, like, hey, we're doing this. Okay. Nobody has to approve your curriculum, okay? You don't have to go to anybody that, oh, is this good enough? You're just not under that authority. Teaching certificates are not required, and we'll get back to that in a moment. Homeschooled students are not required to be enrolled in an accredited program. I don't even know what this means. I mean, I see this on Facebook groups all the time, like, you know, Texas Homeschooling 101, or, you know, there's all sorts of homeschooling groups. And they're like, I want my child in an accredited program. Like, what? I mean, accreditation is, well, like a medical school is accredited, okay? And then those people who do the accrediting have the control over what's being taught in that school. We're not being, you know, we're not under the authority of the state or, you know, the American whatever, or a teachers union or anybody else. Don't worry about it. Okay, however, once in a while, parents will be harassed, and so it is important to know the legalities. It's also helpful to belong to a legal defense organization. It costs a certain amount of money. There are membership dues. I would recommend either of these, Texas Homeschool Coalition or the national version, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They are just really interesting organizations because they will send you free emails. Who gets a free email from one of these? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. It's not just about the legal defense, but I'm still on their email. So I love these. I think the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, don't they have like a debate thing? They have these, they sponsor things. So yeah, they're great. Now, typically you won't be harassed, but I would say this: if you have special needs children, medical situations, sometimes they go after those parents. Okay, I don't even need to say the stuff about pros and cons, I don't think. But just mentioning, you know, obviously private school costs something. And homeschooling is much more adaptable. It can feel onerous. Okay, is that a word we all know? Onerous is, you know, just a heavy burden. It can feel onerous because we doubt ourselves. It's a huge burden. In some ways it is. Also, economically, if you take yourself out of the workforce, then that is a cost. So maybe you're doing it very cheaply, but the fact that you have sacrificed whatever income you were planning on making or could make, then that is kind of a cost. It's difficult for single parents. There is a member of our church who was in a difficult situation where his wife left him. And he had 4 young daughters. What's he going to do? Is he going to send them to public school? He has to work full time. What he did was he moved. He moved to San Antonio. We had a school at that time. We had a Christian school. So I helped teach his daughters. And that was a privilege. So, yeah. But whatever we choose, the responsibility is on us. Now here are some statistics and some quotes to encourage you as a homeschooler. So under the section where it says some stats, even in public school, there's your blank to fill in. Even in public school, children whose parents are involved in their education score higher on tests than those whose parents are not. It's not just about your brains, okay? It's the parents. The most interesting statistics have to do with the educational level of parents who homeschool. Now, some of you in this room have a college degree, but many do not. Does that matter? Does it matter that I have a teaching degree? It was really funny when, I went from teaching in a Christian school to, the Christian school shut down, okay? This doesn't exist anymore. And the rest of us went to homeschooling, and I was kind of, I was actually depressed. But I was looking forward to homeschooling because I'd done it before when they were little. And so, part of me is jazzed. Part of me is going to be like depressed for 6 months because, I didn't have my students. But I told myself, oh, but I get to choose all the curriculum, all of this. So we went back to homeschooling, and I'm like, oh, it is a different skill set. It is a different skill set teaching in a classroom and teaching your own kids. John quit playing with the cat. It's just, it's just totally different. Now here are some interesting studies, and I quoted some stuff here. First of all, one of the things here has to do with certified teachers versus people who are not certified teachers. There is no difference. If you had a group of kids whose moms were certified and a group of kids whose moms were not, there was no difference in their SAT score. It wasn't a help. Now, this is the next thing that is really huge. There was no significant difference in children's SAT scores based on the education level of their parents. Did you get that? Mothers who had not completed high school were able to teach their children just as effectively as mothers with college degrees. Does that surprise you? Does it surprise anybody? Okay, well, I just wanted to encourage you. I know so many people are just, I feel like one of my missions in life is to encourage homeschool moms that don't feel up to it for whatever reason. And sometimes it's that. They don't feel like they have the ability based on their own education. Okay, now this is supposed to be about curriculum, so let's go ahead and segue into a discussion of curriculum. I'm going to break it down by types, okay? We're going to analyze it according to types in various ways. I'm going to talk about curriculum that were written with a different purpose in mind, and then modality, and then finally philosophy. And so let's look first of all at classroom versus homeschool. Now, back in the day when I first started teaching, everything was designed for the classroom. The only thing maybe that was like different would be like a life pack. When I was, I started teaching in the early 1980s, and there did already exist life packs. And then we had the choice between Abeka and Bob Jones. So I taught Bob Jones in a Christian school back then. Now, the fact that these were created for classrooms means that they have a certain, I mean, well, think about Abeka or Bob Jones. How many of you have used Abeka or Bob Jones at all? Okay, most of you. You know what I'm talking about. You've got the book, you've got quizzes, you've got tests, okay? It's this traditional type of, it's meant for a classroom. In other words, the books aren't always clear. Okay, how many of you used Saxon or were taught from Saxon Math? Okay, Saxon Math is the same way. It is originally designed for the classroom. If your child is likes math, is kind of able to decode what the book is saying, your child may do well with Saxon. And by the way, Saxon is great. I love Saxon. It's a really good curriculum. But some students don't do as well with Saxon because they need the input from the teacher to explain, especially stuff like some of those percentage problems in the algebra book. I mean, it's just like, okay, I can't wrap my mind. Sometimes I can't wrap my mind around what they're trying to say. And I'm a math teacher. So how is a child going to decode this? And so guess what the Saxon people did? They created videos so that you get a teacher. Now, does that mean that these curricula are bad? Okay. No, I mean, obviously some of those are really, really good in and of themselves. Now I must say that, and I'm going to reiterate this, no curriculum is perfect. You will find one or maybe a collection that works for you, but even a good one you may need to supplement in some way or simply understand how to use it better. So moving on, let's talk about curricula designed for homeschoolers. And this has been kind of a joy to see, you know, since the 1980s, there has been an explosion of new curricula designed for homeschooling families. For example, the Mystery of History. Has anyone used that or seen it or heard of it? Okay, you've at least heard of it. I used it, well, a couple of the books, not all of them, for my boys. And I just fell in love with the first volume because it integrated biblical history with like the Greeks and Romans and stuff. So you were getting everything. But the neat thing about it was adaptable for different age levels. So you didn't have to segregate, oh, well, this is 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. You could say, okay, well, Bobby and Susie, we're going to do history together. And you can get several ages going with those lessons. And of course, that is just a single subject. And so there are other ones. Apologia has been a favorite. Teaching textbooks has been a favorite of mine. And there are complete curricula, and they have just multiplied. Okay, so I can't even, I mentioned a few, but Kathy Duffy has a list online. You've heard of Kathy Duffy? Did I write it down? Oh yeah, I did. Okay, so here's a place to go. If you hear about a curriculum and you want to know more about it, go see what Kathy Duffy says, just as a kind of a, you know, to get some info on it. Okay, categorized by philosophy. What does that mean? Okay, we go back to our previous session. We were talking about Charlotte Mason. We were talking about classical. Okay, so we can divide up these curriculum by what kind of philosophy they have behind them. Okay, traditional. ABECA, BJU, Horizons, many others are what we call traditional, and they really emphasize, I'm going to say, memory and rote to the exclusion of higher level understanding. There is going to be some discussion, there is going to be literature, but it's not going to be as important in those curricula. So here we have, well, here's a blank, plenty of memory work. So there, that's where you'd fill in there. Plenty of memory work, drill, some discussion, some literature, a small amount of logic debate, but this may be relegated to speech class. Okay, so everything is divided up into subjects. There's not any, like for example, let's say you want to study the Greeks. You know, you could do, that could be your history class, that could be your English class. You could, you know, write an essay, but not with a traditional curriculum. Okay, a traditional curriculum keeps the subjects apart. Okay, many of us grew up like that. Okay, we grew up learning the subjects separately. A unit study approach is the opposite. Okay. Charlotte Mason, I mentioned this before, you can incorporate her ideas without buying her curriculum. Classical, I want to mention these because there's several different ones you can investigate out there. Classical conversations, have you heard of classical conversations? I have, I'm friends with Adela, her name escapes me right now. What's her last name? Butterbaugh. Yes, Butterbaugh. Yes, yes. I was tutoring her kids for a little while, and they are involved in classical conversations, and so it's an eclectic program. Eclectic. Okay, eclectic is a vocabulary word you get today. E-C-L-E-C-T-I-C. Okay, eclectic. Eclectic means you draw everything together, you know, like potluck. And it means basically they're not publishing, you know, like ABECA, they have all their own books and then you buy all their books. But classical conversations draws from other publishers. They have plenty of reading, writing, they have Latin and logic, and they're trying to organize it according to Dorothy Sayers' principles. Now, classical programs typically combine literature, English, and history into one omnibus class. Okay, and we did that when Joe Vondolowski came and he was our principal, and then he taught the omnibus class, and then David had to read Herodotus, and then it was just all combined where, you know, you would write essays and papers based on what you were reading, and in a way it kind of saves time too. Now this particular program is co-op based, where teacher mentors assist homeschooling parents. That's kind of an interesting concept. Directors equip students to discover that all knowledge works together in an indivisible universe rather than a disconnected multiverse, helping students make connections between science, math, philosophy, theology, history, literature, and economics. And in the real world, you know, those things are all connected, right? Now, another way to incorporate classical principles is to take a look at Memoria Press. Now, Memoria, I told you, put out this really sweet Latin curriculum. They are a press. They do create materials. And they're a little bit like a classical version of Abeka in the sense that they cater to both Christian schools and also homeschoolers. So they have actually a more traditional feel. If you look at their website, and I took a quote from their website: classical Christian education is the cultivation of wisdom and virtue through meditation on the good, the true, and the beautiful. This is accomplished in two ways. First, through training in the liberal arts, and secondly, through a familiarity with the great books and the great thinkers of the Western tradition. Okay, I want to explain this. The great books and the great thinkers of the Western tradition. And I mentioned Herodotus. And so David had to read Herodotus. And this was kind of interesting too, because our whole school shifted a little bit in curriculum. And he went from Abeka and that style of learning to Herodotus. And his grades kind of went down for a little while because it's kind of a shift. It really is. And Herodotus and some of those older classical writers, you know, like Virgil and Homer and all those guys, they're important, but here's the thing. You only have time for a finite amount of literature, okay? And if you're going to spend your time on Herodotus and Virgil, you might not get To Kill a Mockingbird or Uncle Tom's Cabin. I mean, there are other works that might be actually more important and more germane. So you might want to try and find a way to integrate both in the balance that you believe is good for your own children. So when we think about great books and great thinkers, we don't have to limit ourselves, certainly, to the classical period. We just simply acknowledge, okay, here's some important ones, and maybe even read excerpts. And so there may be ways you can get excerpts from a lot of different things without reading all of Herodotus. That was a big book. There are great books that have been written in the past 200 years. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of. Well, and you don't even have to read the whole thing. Like, for example, how many of you have read Uncle Tom's Cabin? That book is monumental. I mean, Sam Houston said, oh, well, here's the lady that started the war because Harriet Beecher Stowe was the mother of 8 children, and she put them to bed, and then she went and sat and wrote. And then the chapters got published in this ladies' magazine, and then they finally got put together into a book. And this book is about slavery and what it's like to be a slave in Kentucky, which is kind of like, you know, the best case scenario. Kentucky's a good place to be if you're a slave. But what if the master has debts? And what if the only way to save the whole plantation is to sell 2 of the slaves? Only one of the slaves they were going to sell was this woman and her child. Well, I can't remember if it was the child or the woman or both. But anyway, so Eliza takes the child and runs and makes it across the Ohio River in winter. I will never forget that scene. And then Uncle Tom, he's a man, obviously. He's a slave that has to be sold. And somebody asked him, well, why don't you run away too? And he said, shall I run off and leave all to rack and ruin? And he's a Christian. It's a Christian book. And Uncle Tom is the hero of the story. And, okay, you might feel a little bit intimidated by, it's not that long, but it is, you know, if you want to get through it in 6 weeks, I would say just assign the first 25% and the last 25%. The whole middle is kind of like, where are you going with this story? So this, the reader will never forget this story. And it is historically important. It's important as literature. I don't know why it's mocked in our society, except that it's a Christian book, written by a Christian. So, yeah. Anyway, so there are great books, there are great thinkers, and that has to be included. However you know, whatever curriculum you choose, you got to include those things. Okay, let's move on. Sunlight. I kind of just stuck these in. Sunlight and Timberdoodle. Sunlight and Timberdoodle. How many of you have heard of either of these? Okay. Timberdoodle started out simply as a homeschool family who liked certain products, and then they offered them for sale. Then they started offering kits, like if you want like an 8th grade kit, and then they put together, it's an eclectic kind of a thing where it's not, you know, like Bob Jones or something. It's different companies, different curriculum that they really like. And so it's instructive, even if you don't buy their kits, even if you don't even buy any of their stuff. It's instructive to see what's on their reading list, you know, that kind of thing. Same thing with Sunlight. They have some great stuff in here, great readers. It's an eclectic thing. They do kits. So if you just want to let them make the decision, just buy their 7th grade kit and have it shipped to you, and it'll be complete with all the readers. It's a little more expensive than you just going to the library and picking what you can get, but some things are hard to get at the library. You know, like Christian biographies, stuff like that, you're just going to have to buy. So these are really great. So eclectic, there's our word again. And oftentimes homeschoolers may start with a certain curriculum and then add in other things, you know, so it ends up being eclectic, just homemade eclectic. And so there's the word. Now, curriculum can be expensive. And you may have invested in a program and it's just not working for you. So I just want to reiterate that no curriculum is perfect. You may need to adapt it. Now, first of all, remember that sometimes a problem is simply pacing. You're going too slow or too fast, okay? Now, let's take a look at ways in which a curriculum is difficult to use, and you'll see some of that pacing problem, especially here with too much drill, too many activities. Now, the curricula that are designed for a classroom are this way, on purpose. Okay, somebody is nodding. Yes, you know this. Abeka and Bob Jones, both. And I've used a lot of Bob Jones. If you use Bob Jones, then you kind of have to pick and choose. In fact, what they do, like when I was teaching Bob Jones in the school, I would get a test bank for my biology class. And what that meant was I would be given questions and then I pick my questions for the test. Okay? And then I can generate a test. And the whole curriculum is like that. You have, you know, a section in your book and it's going to have like X number of drills, especially in English. Exercise 1, exercise 2, you're going to have ukulele exercises which your child may not need. Okay, so just give exercises until they get it. Now some have too little. Some have too little in the way of exercises and drill. Some of the homeschool ones are like this. Some of the unit studies are like this. Now teaching textbooks is kind of like this, and I love teaching textbooks, I really do. But there's only one word problem in every lesson.
I think that's either changed or it depends on the grade level. Because my kids, the older levels, like 7 and pre-algebra, those have lots of word problems. So
they must have.
We use the new stuff, the app-based teaching textbooks, where it's an app on the computer,
okay,
or a phone or a tablet. So I don't know if they've updated some of the curriculum that way, or well, maybe the younger age. It was
actually rather recently. I was watching this YouTube on this lady, and she was giving feedback on the teaching textbooks, and I think she was doing the interactive online, and well, that was part of the problem because she didn't understand that math is mastery, and 80% is, you know, that's not passing. You know, you really have to, if you're not getting 95s and 100s, you need to go back and say why. But yeah, she was, I think at that point, there was still only one, but I'm really glad to hear because I do love that, I love that textbook. I used it in the school even though, you know, I am a teacher and I could use a more traditional book. I used teaching textbooks. So if you are in a situation where you need to do something with the math And this can be in any situation, like if you have unit studies and you just need more drill. Dad's Worksheets, it's free, okay? So there's a resource for you. Now I found some interesting curricula as I've been studying more of this recently, and I wrote an article for a magazine. The Life of Fred. Just the title sounds intriguing. Okay, The Life of Fred is a zany math series. It also includes a few books with extra math problems, or word problems rather. Now Singapore also has supplemental materials. And I would say consider it, because the whole Singapore philosophy has to do with, it's just a more, what's the word? My brain is getting foggy. Discovery-based, okay? Remember that, discovery-based, where you're not just all being fed the formula? Okay, Singapore is best at, drawing the student into the process of discovering the answer. Okay, so even if you don't use Singapore, you might look at some of their supplemental stuff. Okay, now that's about math. There's obviously, if you, well, we'll go on to that later. Too much or too little reading. Okay, you wouldn't think that anything would give you too much reading. Can that be bad? I mean, but let's talk about life packs and stuff along those lines. They force the student to focus, decode, understand, and regurgitate. All right? Depending on the child's reading level, that can be difficult. You will need to break up the focus. Read aloud, ask questions, add activities. And by doing this, you'll find out where the problem is. It might be the reading comprehension. And even just reading comprehension, there are several levels to this. We start with phonics when our child is young. We teach them the letters. We teach them the sounds. We teach them the blends, the phonics. And then we start teaching them sight words. Okay. They are able to decode words. And I'm seeing my grandchildren start to do this, and it's just a wonderful thing to see, where they start to read the title of a hymn in the hymn book, and that is decoding. But that's not really comprehension. Comprehension is at the sentence level. And some children don't comprehend very much. They can sound out words, but it's just not going in. It's not clicking. Sometimes you can help them with that by either having them write. So it's like a reverse engineering it, write something. Or you can actually find a book and then get the audio book. And then you read it together and you listen. And you're listening to it. Problems with the main idea. So here's a higher level problem, but this is what's going to happen in the life packs. You've got to be able to read a paragraph, read a text, and what is the main idea? There are resources. Critical Thinking is a website you can go to. But you don't have to buy stuff. You can just sit down and write a paragraph. Have him write a paragraph. And it has to be about something. Pick something he likes, you know, and then say, okay, talk about this. This is the main idea. Talk about that, and then have him write a paragraph. So again, it's reverse engineering the problem. And then you can go back and then read a paragraph and then ask him, what is this paragraph about? Now, if there is too little reading, use another curriculum's reading list and add. So let's say you are just, you don't have money, okay? That's most of us. We don't have a lot of money. We can't afford the $1,000 Sunlight Express Deluxe package, whatever, the one we wanted. But we can afford this $5 book on eBay. It's a used Abeka or something, right? So we're cobbling together a curriculum based on what we can afford. That's okay. You know, the battered old textbook can serve as the grammar element of your study. And then you start to ask yourself, what do I want to reinforce this with? If I have a history book, I can use historical fiction. Oh, I write historical fiction. This is set during the Great Awakening, the 1740s. So I've got a series set in the 1700s. I've got one written during the time period of the American Revolution. So let's say you're studying the American Revolution, and in my novel I've got the Battle of Bunker Hill, I've got Germantown, I've got Hannah's Cowpens, I've even got a cameo or two of George Washington. Oh, that was fun. But so you can take great literature or even just fun books like mine and add them to your Abeka. Add them to your $5 textbook. And another thing to do is read aloud. And I don't know if I'm preaching to the choir here, but especially if you've got, do you do read alouds, Emily?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so obvious for a larger family. I tried to do read alouds. I think, you know, by the time I started homeschooling, you know, we had our Christian school and then I was homeschooling. And at that point, I think if I had, you know, trained them a little bit more, we could have done more of that. But I remember reading Carry On, Mr. Bowditch. Is that how you pronounce his name? That was one of our read alouds. And when I was in public school, in 9th grade, I had this great English teacher, and she would do the last 10 minutes of the period was read aloud. And so we would just sit quietly, and she would read from something. And to this day, one of my favorite Shakespeare plays is The Merchant of Venice, because she read that to us. The quality of mercy is not strained, it drippeth down from heaven. I remember that to this day. Now, I think I mentioned unit studies. Unit studies are great. Unit studies are one of those hands-on things. Gather round. Clara, is that the one you're using? Okay. Oh, it just looks so fun. That you just look at one topic, and then you can add reading to it. You can add all kinds of stuff. The only deficiency is the grammar stage. The grammar stage is the drill stage. The, you know, math drill, you know, things that you just got to do in that kind of a repetitive way. memorization, that kind of thing. So just generally speaking, you know, I can't speak for Gather Round, but generally speaking, unit studies can be that way. And I think I mentioned learning styles already. Beware of, next page, too much screen time. Okay, there are, now you may find that for a single subject or maybe a couple, that is great to have a computer thing where they get interaction, but I'm not really that opinionated about curriculum because I know that everyone has strengths and weaknesses, but I would say I do have strong opinions about a couple of things, and this would be one of them. You know, don't go looking for an all computer or all video situation. That's just not good for anybody. Okay. Your goal. What is your ultimate goal? Number one, to shape their character, right? You know, beyond just the gospel and their soul, you want to shape their character. Think of that as, remember, common grace. You as a parent are God's appointed means to restrain evil, just as a magistrate restrains evil out in the world. You restrain evil under your husband's authority at home. Second goal, you give them the tools to learn. And I was just talking to Clara, and she said that while she wasn't sure about how good of an education she got, she did learn how to teach herself. She could, you know, read a book, she could follow directions, she could teach herself, and that is wonderful. That is a gift. Now you may have heard of Montessori's, Maria Montessori. I didn't mention her philosophy, but one thing she was wrong about is that children don't do any of these things naturally. Okay, they have to be shaped and molded and guarded and guided. If your children are grumbling and fighting, they have to go back. You have to go back to the respect. Start with the respect, and then if you're having trouble, go back to that. And I see this on Facebook. Oh, my child doesn't like X. And you know, I'm thinking, okay, if my child hates broccoli, maybe I'll serve peas tomorrow. I'm just not I'm not married to broccoli. But you know, at some point you're just gonna have to say, hey, it doesn't matter what my child likes in terms of curriculum. It's not about you. It's about what you need. And so don't give in to your child's likes and dislikes per se. On the other hand, don't squash him when he's curious or has an entrepreneurial spirit. That is so wonderful. I'm just so amazed by Emily's children. They're in business, and they're not even that old. And then I was talking to Lily Davis the other day, and she was talking about writing a children's book. And so I was encouraging her. I said, well, you know, I have the software. If you get to that point of, we could just publish it on Amazon. And Lily is 11 years old. And then she was saying, oh, what's your daughter's name that draws? Emily.
Well, they all do, but what do you mean?
The one, well, Lily is in partnership with one of your daughters.
Evelyn, yeah.
Evelyn's the one. Okay, so Lily was telling me that Evelyn was drawing the pictures, the illustrations for this book. And I'm like in shock. You know, they're in business. And so I'm encouraging Lily, let's do it. I even went and looked in my Vellum software to see what kind of sizes I could get. But yeah, those are things that you see more in homeschoolers. You know, I would never have thought growing up, you know, I just didn't have, you know, I was shaped by the public school. I was shaped by the traditional, okay, these are the subjects, and there are some wonderful things you can do. And within the boundaries of the laws of the state of Texas, you have a wide scope for imagination, as Anne of Green Gables would say. So, that is that. And what I would like to do is open it up for you all to come and look at some of the materials I have. If you want to look at things that maybe you haven't seen before, or if you want to look at some of the books, or if you want to even buy them from me. I also have a Texas history curriculum.